Coming up on this episode of Caden Friends, I am joined this week with our guest, Dr. Hugh Foley.
Dr. Foley's too woke. Right? He's like out there talking about American Indian mascots and how they reinforce stereotypes and can cause psychological harm to young people and make fun of native traditions. All these things that are just so obvious that it's amazing that somebody would even argue back about it.
This episode's most likely going to be called Dr. Foley Goes Woke.
Goes woke. It should be. Yeah, it should be. It'll wake people up a little bit.
Hello and welcome to Caden Friends. I am joined this week with our guest, Dr. Hugh Foley, and co-host, Alex.
All right, Alex. Former student.
Former student.
Both of us are former
students.
K2,
yeah. Dr. Foley, I mean, as we know him, he's a professor, and he's now a department head.
Department head of Communications, Fine Arts, and Native American Studies.
Which, that's crazy, here at our Rogers State University in Claremore. His primary areas of scholarship are Oklahoma music, Native American studies, and cinema. Is that correct?
That's all correct.
Yeah. And you also have done your radio DJ.
Long radio history.
Yes.
That's a whole nother story in itself.
And you've authored a few things.
Books, articles, bathroom postings.
So yeah, a very well-loved and
thank you.
Well acclaimed as well. People, you have a following. People enjoy you.
Sometimes it's a little intimidating, but it's always heartwarming.
Yeah.
And I met Roy Clark. You remember his name? He's like deceased now, country musician, longtime Tulsa resident. And I was talking to him one day, and I said, "Does it bother you ever when people come up and say, 'Can I have an autograph?' or 'Hi,' or 'I want to take a selfie,' or whatever?" He goes, "No, because without those people, I wouldn't be who I am today." And so I always kind of remember that as somebody's yelling at me as I'm trying to exit a restaurant. And they're like, Hugh. Okay, I'm going to go see what's happening.
I mean, since you have such a wide range of areas, what is the most common thing that people know you from?
Depends on the community, really, because I have a few different areas. So I have Rogers State, where I teach, and I've been here for a really long time. And so I have a lot of students that are out in the world, and I see at all kinds of different events. And because of that, I've been on television here for so many years, 25 years, that a lot of people in the community and around the Tulsa metropolitan area in northeastern Oklahoma, they've seen me on TV. So anytime you see somebody that you've seen on TV, you kind of think you know them because they've been in your house, in your bedroom, your kitchen, wherever else they have televisions. So I'd say that's the first thing, depending on this area. So a lot of people know me from TV here. Sometimes I will just talk. And because of my voice and how it sounds and everything, someone will say, "Oh, I know you from somewhere, but I don't know where." And it's because, well, try this. Tonight at 10 on RSU TV. Right?
Yes.
That happens every hour and half hour all day long. So I'm like, okay, maybe that was it. So it's either that, or then there's a lot of the radio people that I know sort of in central Oklahoma, western Oklahoma, where I'm involved in those communities of Cushing and Stillwater. Know people there for that. And I also call football, high school football on Friday nights. And so as a result of that kind of football world, high school football world, I know that. And then also there's the music world, the music scene in Oklahoma. So, if I go to a show, I tend to know people because of my Cush work and or my playing and performing out and that sort of thing. So it just really kind of depends on the community. If it's a Native community and the things that I work with there, or if it's
because you're a very big Native advocate.
Yeah, I would say an ally and supporter and advocate really is the way to go with that. My son is an enrolled Muskogee citizen, and that's one of the major reasons why I became involved in that world. And I'm always happy and honored to be associated with it, but I'm always very cautious about speaking for it in any way whatsoever, because I might be an interpreter and I might be a catalyst for getting some information out there, but I'm not the go-to authentic voice for certain issues.
Are you yourself Native?
I'm not.
You're not. That's what I didn't think so. That's what Kate and I had talked about.
No, I'm probably, and not to overstate the thing because I know it's being recorded and all that, but I might be the last non-native Native American advisor, I guess, and
but you've done a lot of
not
work.
just teach. Lots of work, and I'm very committed to some communities, but I just don't celebrate I don't celebrate's the wrong word. Brag about it, I guess, is the way to go. Oh, I know this and I know that, and I learned this, and I've been here and I've seen this, and you probably won't get a chance to see it, but I got a chance to see it, and let me tell you all about it, because really, all of those Native activities, it really requires multiple repeat visits to learn the real specifics and details that really add up to the whole. You see something one time, you're kind of overwhelmed with just the main visual, as opposed to all of the philosophic or theological underpinnings of what's happening in the actual environment. So, and here at RSU, I was the Native American Student Association advisor for 25 years. And when I became department head, I was very fortunate. Rebecca Warren, who's Cherokee citizen, teaches next door, and she was very interested in helping with NASA. And I said, well, not only can you help with it, take it and run with it. You know, I had my chance for 25 years to help students and do the events and all of that. And so it's nice to have a Cherokee citizen leading Native students, because I think a non-Native can make a difference, but if for a role model and somebody who's really in the community and is a citizen, I think it ratchets up the credibility and the need for Native people in advisory, administrative, and higher positions in the education world. So I'll stop there on that.
Yeah, no, I think that's good, and I'm glad. I mean, you have so many different responsibilities, but I mean, I don't want to understate. I mean, you've done a lot for the Native community. And I think you mean a lot to a lot of people there.
Thank you.
And I mean, you've probably been welcomed into a lot of different, you know. I mean, you've been master of ceremony at a few different powwows, right? And everything.
I've done that, and that's a real challenge being an MC at a powwow when you're a non-Native. People really have to have a lot of trust in you to do that. And I think 4 times I've done that, and it's always by request. People knew me as a result of usually my radio or TV work. Yeah, and they've seen me present, and so I know enough to go into that environment. And as I always say, a bunch of people tell you no, they couldn't make it, so you finally got down to me. I got to bring the white guy in here to be the MC because everybody else was busy, basically. And I just joke about that, but it's always an honor and privilege, and I feel really good when people invite me in to do those things, because there's been such a negative history and connection between Natives and non-Natives for such a long time, and some of that rings true even still yet today from our highest executive leadership in the state. And I'll stop there.
I don't think you need to say, because it is, very well known that, the governor, who is a Native citizen, you've probably done far more for Native citizens than the governor has.
Well, I wouldn't go that direction, but, and I'm cautious about what I'm saying here, because obviously we're being recorded, and so somebody could see this and everything. And I am a state employee. And I just signed a loyalty oath to the state of Oklahoma. So I am loyal.
So how dare you?
I'm loyal to the state.
That's on me. That was me speaking.
No, wait. However, the governor is also an employee of the state who does get a salary here. I'm an employee of the state, of the salary. So if he were in this room right now, I would consider him another state employee, although he's the chief executive of the state.
Right.
So he can do all kinds of stuff just on his own without, me and saying anything about it. So I just try and be cautious and be a good critical thinker and express myself at the appropriate moment regarding his particular perspective. But we have 3 more years of him, so we just have to kind of deal with it and accept what we can change, or accept what we can't change and what we maybe can change. And a lot of people are just going to wait it out, I think. It's like 3 more years. That's the thing I learned from tribal leaders many years ago. A governor is going to come and go, but the tribes are forever.
Oh, yeah.
So they can wait it out.
You wrote a song for him, right? For the gaming compact?
I did. That's way back. He used a legal term that's known as unjust enrichment. And so it's somebody getting money that they don't deserve or got some kind of ill-gotten gains. And so that's what he said that the tribes were doing, was being unjustly enriched by gaming or any other deal that they have that benefits them more than his perception of it benefiting the state of Oklahoma. And I think and I won't direct this toward him, but I'll just say all people. I think all people could have a better understanding of the difference between perception and perspective. And so he has his perception, but it doesn't appear he has very good perspective, which is understanding what other people say and think from their point of view. So he's always about everything being fair to all Oklahomans and so on and so forth. But things have not ever been fair to everybody ever. And they're never going to be. But we are trying to continuously do our best to balance things out. So I noticed just yesterday, and this is current, he signed an executive order getting rid of all of the diversity, equity, and inclusion offices in all Oklahoma higher institutions, or higher ed institutions. So what we're going to do is take that office out. So we don't need an office for diverse ethnicities, gender perspectives, ages, military backgrounds, physical issues. That's just all going to be handled, I guess, by student affairs, the beleaguered student affairs office. So on the other hand, I think that things will take care of themselves. Our K through 12 population in Oklahoma is now more than 50% non-white. Now, granted, that's in the major urban areas, the metropolitan areas, as opposed to what we call micropolitan areas, which are the rural areas, the smaller areas. So with the K through 12 population of more than 50% non-white, we will see things change in a generation. But right now, it's about 60-40 overall, like adults and minors, regarding the state's population breakdown. 60%-ish white, 40%-ish non-white. And so I think over time, things will balance themselves out. And this is sort of the last gasp of the conservative right to get their theological and political perspectives into the mainstream while they can. And that's just a political comment, so probably won't go too much further than that.
So So that we're on the last generation of the.
I think so.
Last generation, maybe two. Depending on how things go.
Right. I think so.
I mean, what it is it's trying to anger people into motivating them. I think the group that's there. I mean, that's not a real policy. It's just to a group of people to get them upset. It's feeding this, I don't know, about the diversity and inclusion thing. That's not a real thing. That's a real concern. It's just a thing.
You hear diversity and it upsets certain groups.
Well, usually it's people who are, I would just say from all this, I did a lot of work over the years on the American Indian mascot issue.
Yes.
And this was something,
one of our notes.
It came up early on, and it was something I hadn't really confronted before. And so I started working on it. And then I took a consumer level Hi8 video camera around high school football games in the area and just started shooting what was going on.
Yeah. So
whether it was a sign that students were putting up, or maybe it was something on a helmet.
And when was this?
We're talking the late 90s.
Yeah.
Here.
So I mean, this is well before the movement. That you get
now it would be considered woke.
Yeah.
Dr. Foley's too woke. Right? He's like out there talking about American Indian mascots and how they, reinforce stereotypes and can cause psychological harm to young people and, make fun of native traditions, all these things that are just so obvious that it's amazing that somebody would even argue back about it. Well, the other person would say, well, that's, contemporarily, we have another educational leader in our state who that's his favorite buzzword, is woke. And I think now that term it's kind of fading out. If you sound antiquated just by saying it, because it's kind of a joke now.
Yeah, it's definitely, I do think it's hit its peak. And I think there's still a group of people who, will throw it around. There's definitely major politicians right now who still use it, but I do think it's on the decline.
Well, it's just a new PC. We used to say PC. That's too PC. And then we learned to say, well, if somebody says this is PC, be aware of that, because what they're really telling you is they don't believe that. They're just going to say it this way, so they're not going to, quote, offend somebody else. Yeah. But I think that cultural sensitivity is a very important critical thinking skill to learn. When I was in the military, we went overseas, you got some training that, you know, when you go to Turkey, don't call people a turkey, you know, or like whatever it is that you learn in there, or don't do certain things that are culturally inappropriate in those places. And that's not woke. That's becoming sensitized to this place that you're going.
Yeah.
And here in Oklahoma, we have a unique situation because of the way that the state came together, in that it was a
Native behind you.
Yeah, well, here we go. It was a Native American dumping ground.
Yeah.
And some of your activists, Native American activists, would say it was a big Native American prison. And why would you say that? Because Native people were sent here and they couldn't leave. So what is it when you're sent somewhere and you can't leave? It's prison. So that's where the whole story of Standing Bear comes from, which is one of Oklahoma's great stories. So Standing Bear, the Ponca chief, big statue of him up there in Ponca City. And I won't retell the whole story or anything, but his whole thing was, I'm a man, you know, if you cut your wrist or hand, it's going to bleed red. I cut mine, it's going to bleed red. We're the same, because at that time, Native Americans weren't considered people. And so he had to, or humans, you know, they were considered less than. Yeah. So when this trial of Standing Bear had to first determine, the judge first had to determine if Standing Bear was a person. Once he was determined to be a person, then the judge could say he's covered by the Constitution. So that's what we talk about. Standing Bear is this great civil rights leader, and we should be talking about Standing Bear in every 5th grade, 7th grade classroom, not making them watch some one-sided, theologically bent, animated video that comes from a commercial entity that's contracting with our current State Department of Education, led by a theologically driven leader.
Wonder what that's a reference to.
You know,
you're not doing PragerU in your classroom.
No comment. No, yes, for critical thinking purposes, it's like, let's watch this. Did it really benefit the Native Americans for the Europeans to arrive?
Yeah.
Aren't they doing pretty well? I mean, if the Europeans had never shown up, they'd still, you know, be running the country.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting. So I went to one of the places, and I remember this vividly. I went to Adair, which is one of the places you talked about.
Adair Warriors.
The Adair Warriors. And I remember growing up, you know, I've went through quite a change in my life. So my graduate was 65 people, very small town, conservative school. And so I remember growing up, and, you know, we didn't have a mascot when I was going through school. And, you know, people would complain about that, and they would, you know, I remember them saying, oh, some liberals in California got on to us. And so they threw a fit about it. So we don't have one. And at the time I was like, well, this is stupid. Why can't we? But it, you know, through coming into college, and then like, you know, Kate and I both worked at the TV station, and you had a class
Remember
on
all
there.
that.
And so I, you know, learning through that and learning about the Native American and the mascots, and, you know, the sensitivities or the insensitivities that it causes, you know, really helped shape my perspective. And now it's like, you know, why, you know, you can easily change you know, you can still be a warrior, and you can just, you know, there were warriors throughout different cultures. You could be a Greek warrior. Like, there's no reason why they couldn't keep the name, change the mascot.
Well, Adair is kind of interesting because that was the first place that I went.
Oh, really?
Very first place I went back then. And the Tulsa World typically prints all the high school football schedules, so I got them all. And then I went to the State Athletic Association. I got their little book for all the high schools, and I just found all the schools with the mascots in it. The internet is still not infancy, but it's still developing in the late 90s. And so I saw Adair Friday night. Hey, that's just right over here. I can just roll right over there and see what's up. So I went over, and they had a person there that was not actually from the school, but was from there's like a Christmas train place over there in eastern Oklahoma that a lot of people go to. It's a big
Dry Gulch, is that the
Dry
one?
Gulch, right? So
yes,
right. So
yes.
so someone from Dry Gulch said, "I've got this outfit, and it's a native outfit, and I'm gonna bring it over." And it was there. I think I can't remember much else about it except that. And so I get there, they had a teepee set up and, you know, all of that. And then I saw this character come out of it, and he had this big head on. It was the ultra stereo. He looked like the old Cleveland Indians mascot that's no longer existing anymore. Yeah. Now they're the Guardians, I think. Yeah. And so, all right, so this guy, I was like, what? I can't believe that. And so my incensed side was like, oh my God, that's terrible. But my documentarian side was like, oh my gosh, that's the best. That's exactly what I wanted. You know, the worst, most gross caricature of a Native American.
This was the first place you went.
First place I went.
Which is, you know, it's crazy because that's where I went to school.
So I did all that, and then I came back, and literally 2 days later, because in those days in the TV station, if I wanted something on the air, here's how I did this. I would go home, and I would take my Hi8 camera, and I would hook it up to the VHS machine or VCR, and run the signal into the back of the VCR and use the pause button on the VHS to do the editing.
Oh my goodness.
And that was my edited VHS video that I would then bring to campus and the TV classroom and pop it in the VHS and hit play. And that's just how I did the videos. 98 is what we're talking here. And so by the time I got off the air and got back over here, I already had a call from the president's office, and somebody had already called and complained from Adair that I was using the television station for my political purposes, and this was inappropriate, and I was calling Adair racist and all that. And so he called me over and he said, well, what's up? And I said, well, I told him. He goes, well, this is your academic freedom. But at the time, the president at the time, I'll say his name, Joe Wiley, Dr. Wiley, he said, well, would you mind going a little further out of our immediate recruiting base? Like, can't you find some other schools that aren't like we have kids coming from Adair. I'm like, okay, I get your point, but sort of. And so I kind of started moving west and southwest, which was fine because there's so many schools and there's so much imagery. I'd get someplace, I'd do the first half at one place, and halftime I'd take off and go somewhere else to the next town and get some more video. And then that thing really took off. It had a lot of legs, and ultimately it has proven correct because we've had some schools change. Tulsa Union was seemingly the biggest offender because they had the same name as the Washington pro football team. And of course they were a highly visible school. They would be on ESPN and sort of that kind of thing, and documentaries were made about them, and so they made their change, and I thought that was positive. And Oklahoma City University, they changed, and some other schools have changed, but there are some that haven't, and that'll just continue on. Now I think it may be harder to change because of the way in which the so-called wokeness is thrown out there. Although I learned, and I'll just go ahead and go on this trip for a second, the legislature passed this House Bill 1775 a couple of years ago, and the whole point of that was that you can't teach anything that makes a student feel uncomfortable or sad about their ethnicity. So if you're saying white people did this to the black people, and they did this to the Native people, and they did this to the Mexican people, and the little white kids sitting out there in their chair going, oh, well, I feel kind of bad about being white because all these white people did all these negative things. So that's the point of that. However, the Oklahoma State high school requirements for teaching state history require that we teach colonial attitudes, and we also teach the Declaration of Independence. Okay, well, in the Declaration of Independence, it calls Native people merciless Indian savages bent on destruction of everybody.
And that's going to cause someone to feel...
Okay, so if I'm a little Native kid and I'm sitting out in my 11th grade high school classroom and the teacher is telling me that Thomas Jefferson thought that Native Americans were merciless Indian savages, doesn't that make me feel bad? So I've thought about this, and somebody might want to think about it. I just saw a complaint made against a Tulsa high school under House Bill 1775 that was complaining that some kind of course they have was teaching something that was inappropriate according to House Bill 1775. So my complaint would be, well, the whole state is teaching the Declaration of Independence, which is technically illegal by these standards if we're using that to teach people about natives, well, it gets really hard. Well, you need some critical thinking ability.
Yeah.
At that point, you've got to say, well, you know what the Declaration of Independence is? It's a hit piece if you're into politics. It's a hit piece against the King of England. And it's trying to scare the colonists. And the best way to scare them is that there are all these natives that are going to come kill you, your wife, your children, and take all your stuff. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, if you're a critical thinker, can you like deal with that? Well, if you can deal with that, then you can deal with a statement like the United States is a stolen land built by stolen people. Well, what does that mean? Unpack it. Well, taken from natives and built by slaves of African descent. Okay, well, that's too harsh. All right, well, like how else can we get around this? You know, if you teach 1920s history, this Killers of the Flower Moon movie that just came out that brought out some very important historical aspects of our past. Here in 1921, you've got the Tulsa race riot where black people are being killed by white people. And then right up the road, you've got Native Americans being killed by white people. So the previous thought was, well, you can talk about this without talking about color because it doesn't really, these are just people doing this to each other. Well, that can't be the only part of the equation. You're doing a calculus problem. You know, you don't just leave out a primary component of the problem. So I think that we still have a ways to go, and it is going to be this shift in population that's going to change that. We're a very conservative state. We're considered, you know, a ruby red state. Mm-hmm. And the joke was the buckle of the Bible Belt. You know, we have a very conservative faction here, and that is fine for those people. Mm-hmm. The whole thing is you're not supposed to use a theologically and politically driven perspective on public schools. And you know, that's the thing is you can think whatever you want and you can have whatever political opinion you want, whatever theological opinion you want, but in the academic environment we're trying to get to a well-rounded, multi-balanced, multi-perspective point of view so we can understand all the aspects. Why were Oklahomans killing other Oklahomans in 1921? Well, remember, Native Americans weren't even citizens of the United States yet. Indian Citizenship Act hadn't even happened yet. And so the perception was that we could just do whatever we want with these folks. And that's what Killers of the Flower Moon illustrates. So pretty quickly, these conversations can go down, you know, dark paths, funny paths, very critical paths. And I is getting toward the end of my career in higher ed. Maybe after this interview, that might be it. I don't know, but
well, this won't post. You know, we have
this will be. You'll have a few months.
Save it till January, February, March, or something. No, that's all fine.
A lot of our stuff, you know,
will come out in the summer, so it will actually be a few months. So you'll have a good
semester.
Run. You'll have a good run.
Okay, well that's good. We have plenty of time then to get everybody ready for it. No, and actually, what I've said is true. It's not like I'm making it up or anything, and that's just what I'm trying to get to. Is you don't have to make this stuff up. So much extreme stuff happens every day anyway.
History is hard and it's harsh, but it's, I mean, you can't just not, you know, learn about it. And, you know, every facet of history matters. The small details are, you know, they matter.
Have you had to censor anything, or have you had any issues here at the university with anything like that?
No, because we do have this concept of academic freedom. And I'm also a very practiced broadcaster and journalist. And when I was in the military as a public relation or public affairs specialist was my actual role. So I'm very aware of speaking in public and how to talk. And if I'm on television, I'm not going to say anything that's too incendiary that I can't back up with facts. Yeah. So for example, just a little bit ago, you know, I was kind of picking on some of our leadership in the state, but that's all factually based. So it's easy. It's right there. It's in the news yesterday, and it's obvious what's going on. Yeah. All you have to do is just listen and watch and pay attention. And then if you have the right, if you're educated and you can sum it all up and contextualize it, then you can maybe say something about it. So I'm just usually cautious. Now, the famous thing in the military we learned was I cannot confirm nor deny. So that's the pat answer to anything that you think is going to get you in trouble.
So real quick, how long were you in the military for?
I was 3 years active and 1 year reserve.
When was that?
Right after I got out of high school. I graduated Muskogee High School, and I worked at Astro World in Houston as a water ski show announcer for summer. And then at the end of that summer, I'd worked on getting into the military. A suggestion from my father, actually, because he'd done some military broadcasting in the early 60s on board Navy ships. They had what was called a sight system, and that was like a radio TV system.
Good Morning Vietnam type of stuff.
Pre. But then that is exactly what I got into, the American Forces Network. So I went to military broadcasting school where we did radio, television, public affairs, and then I was sent to the American Forces Network in Europe, and I was a radio production person and DJ there for a couple of years. And then I came back to the States, and I went to Fort McPherson in Georgia, where I was also a public affairs person, and I produced a syndicated radio program that was sent out on vinyl to radio stations all over the country and world. Little, like small AM stations that needed programming. It was sort of a 15-minute music program, and the job was for me to go to the different record companies in Atlanta and get records and bring them back and decide what I thought might be on the charts 5 months from then, because the records were made and then had to be distributed, and they were for certain dates, and so it might be months down the road. And so I would produce these in the studio at Fort McPherson, and then they would be pressed up onto vinyl, and then they would be sent around.
So you had to predict what you thought would go viral in a sense.
Yeah, right. Yeah, literally. And then, so
did you get anything correct?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what, but kind of, you know, a couple things that weren't correct, but turned out not be hits, but be cool. You know, kind of like went that way. Like I remember putting at the Clash, I wouldn't, Should I Stay or Should I Go on that show, even though they, you know, really never made with that song. I don't think it was a big pop hit or anything. And so, because I'd come out of this music background, and that's pretty much a whole other story. But once I got out of the service, the first time, active duty, I worked for a year at a radio station in New York, and then I went back to Georgia to start college. And I just realized I needed to go to college. And because what happens in a lot of the northeastern part of the country is young people go to school, then they go get their experience, and then all coalesces into a working professional somehow in their late 20s or by their 30 or something like that. Whereas I started radio when I was in high school, when I was 16, and then I went into military broadcasting, and then I worked for a year in radio. And so I already had all this experience, but what I didn't have was the educational foundation to be a really good public speaker. And so I had this voice, and the military cleaned my diction up because I came from Oklahoma. So they had a lot of work to do on me, but they did. And yet when I was in the Northeast, people are by and large very educated there. And so I'd get to the end of some long-winded statement and get self-conscious about either my grammar, my word choice, syntax, and I had the realization that maybe it is time for me to go to college. So at age 22, I went to college, and I'm still here.
Why'd you never leave?
Why'd I never leave?
Yeah.
I like the whole idea of being in a community of learners and education, and the positive experience that goes along with people trying to improve themselves and move forward in a good way in life. And I've been blessed my whole life with pretty good thinking skills. And so as a result of that, it always seemed easy to me. And subsequent to a school seeming easy to me, teaching then seemed easy to me because I was very comfortable with the information, passionate about the information, and then I have the trained delivery skills to get it out there. And so all those things combined made me have success and positive feedback. And then whenever you have success and positive feedback, typically you kind of want to keep on going with that.
How did you do you still teach like your class on RSU TV? How did that come about?
That's a good question.
Well, RSU TV, when it came into play, I believe in the 80s, had a primary educational bent. So before I even worked here, I watched RSU TV, and I'd see the instructors on TV, and I thought,
oh wow. So it started before even you.
Yeah, yeah. It was like in the late 80s, or by the early 90s for sure. There were several programs on here, classes on here. And so when I came in and they saw I had some broadcasting experience, they said, hey, you want to teach on TV? And so at the time I was like, okay, we'll see how that goes. And so I just started doing it at that point. And when I went in, I remember there was what was called a Crestron, like you have a little Stream Deck switcher here. There was a switcher on the board, and the guy then was showing me how it worked. And it took like a second to go between functions if you wanted to go between the VHS and the overhead projector back to you or whatever. And maybe it took a second or two, and I was like, well, does anybody care about the dead air in between the... He's like, you're going to be fine. Don't worry about it, because like nobody else even asked that question, number one, or even concerned about it. And for me, it was like, that's not a very fast change for TV, but okay. And so in those days, you were essentially a VJ because you could play a VHS, you could play a DVD, you could put something on the Elmo. Finally, they brought the computer in there. You could put something on the computer, or it was you had about 5 options. And so you literally are doing the show and being your own technical director there. And back when I was in the Army, I went through television training. So that's where I got my TV training, was there, where you had to do all the functions of the studio. So you were camera and floor director and talent. Then you also had to be the technical director and the director and run then what was called film chain, which we don't have anymore because now it's all on a hard drive. But there was a room that had 3 different film projectors angled at this mirror called a multiplexer, and you would sit back there and they'd say, ready slide machine, ready slide 1 or whatever, and you'd hit the button and it would change the mirror to the slide machine, and then that would shoot that slide image out to the control area, and they would use the green screen and put the slide behind the talent.
Wow.
And so anyway, that was all.
A lot of working parts.
Yeah, right. So for me here at the Crestron, I was like, oh, this is not film chain at least, so okay, I got this. But
and this is pretty quick.
It's pretty quick. Yeah,
yes,
we can switch right now.
Right, there we go. Right. So I started doing that in 98, and however many hours that now is, it's over 1,000 plus hours of live television where
celebrated your 25th anniversary.
Yeah, 25th anniversary this year. And so and I get to do both things because I have the Native Studies class in the spring where I get to work on that area and expertise and invite people in or do interviews and put those on the air.
And that's what I saw while working at the TV station
and then in the fall I do cinema, where we talk about just appreciating films, as you know, from that class. And it's really not so much history as it is how to appreciate the various components of cinema when you go watch a film, if you're not a production person or have that
that's a really great
background.
class. That's why I would watch that a lot.
I took that class.
Yeah, you actually took the class.
I did a lot of my papers for whatever reason. I remember I wanted to find them and like print one out and bring it in and be like, this is. But I cannot remember where I did it. But I was obsessed with like Wreck-It Ralph and Avatar.
Okay.
And
I remember those essays. Those were awesome.
Thanks. But I remember like I would, every paper I did, it always just talked because, we would watch, you would show a film and then, you had us like compare, make comparisons. And I remember, and actually I'm glad to hear, because there was a movie that we watched and I don't remember, but it was a Bollywood movie.
Okay.
And it was like basically the concept of it was, like some people like working themselves to death and getting like a healthier like work-life balance was sort of like the message of the film.
Was that the Three Idiots movie? Was it 3 guys in the college?
Yes.
And going through all the things they were going through, and
yes, and one of them I think threw himself out of a building.
Yeah, right. That's right. Yeah, one of the characters who was stressed out about what had happened in the narrative and everything. But yeah, that film Three Idiots is a huge for a while it was the biggest film out of Bollywood, for many years, like the most successful film. And they tried to make one here in the US, I think, that didn't do well. They don't know if they call it the same thing, or I can't remember exactly what happened with what they tried to do in the US. But with Bollywood, they tried to take out the songs from the Bollywood movies because American movie watchers, for some reason, they think won't like them.
Yeah.
But if you take the songs out, you actually lose part of the narrative, because the songs actually carry some of the narrative along based on what's in them. But I always like using that film because it's about the college environment and what's important about education and how we can focus on the wrong things sometimes because we are influenced by our parents or by our teachers or by someone who thinks that they know what's best for us instead of us knowing what's best for us. And
a great movie.
Yeah. So I still use it. I used it everybody, they always love that movie. They don't think they're going to like it at the beginning because it's, you know, it's in Hindi and it's this Bollywood thing. And now it's, I don't even know how many years old now, maybe 15 years old, but they use these little flip phones and, you know, it just the technology all looks antiquated and everything. But I think that students, the story resonates with students because it gets down to that significance of education. And then at the early part of the semester, I always use it as a mental wellness check and say, you know, sometimes that we have issues going on within us and we could use some professional assistance, and we have some here on campus. So if you're stressed out because of whatever, your living conditions, your roommate, you're stressed out from too much work, you've got a job, you know, your family, whatever it is that's dragging you down, you should go talk to somebody instead of letting it just bubble and fester within you and then ultimately surface in a negative way.
Yeah. I remember that film. That's just like the main thing I remember, that and then the papers I wrote. And so, you know, I still, every now and then I'll think of that movie and I'm like, what is it?
Yeah. Three Idiots.
Three Idiots.
Yeah, there you go.
And you'd kind of like break it up and talk about it and everything.
Oh yeah, I always.
So,
And finally, I think we get to week 15. I was like, okay, I'm gonna keep my hands off the pause button on this one. But for the most part, we're gonna like stop this every minute and talk about it. So, yeah.
Yes, I do remember that was something that I would be like, oh, come on, just let the film play, like, because I got invested into it. You know, the first 30 minutes, it's like, you know, pause as much as you want, but then by the time you're halfway, it's like, Dr. Foley, please, I want to watch the film. But it was a good film. It was a good fun class.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm a big cinema fan.
Yeah. What got started with that? Why did you?
Why do I like the movies? I can go all the way back to my grandmother when I was like a kid, and like, I mean, really kid, like 5, 6 years old, taking me to movies in Dallas and going to these little movie theaters and going to see all Disney stuff, as I recall. I don't remember going to see any live action except Song of the South, which you can't see anymore. That's the Uncle Remus movie, which that was the first movie I cried in as a little kid. It was so sad when Uncle Remus got sent away at the end, and he's like all sad and walking away. I was like,
I haven't seen it. So
I remember crying. Well, you can't now. It's like it's unavailable. Yeah. You can find some bootleg copy of it somewhere. So Uncle Remus gets sent away, and then right as he's all sad, the little bluebird comes in and gets in, and there's a bluebird on my shoulder, you know, that whole thing, and so then he's kind of okay at the end. But
that's your first movie, or the first one you remember?
Well, that's one of the couple of Disney's one. That's the one I remember being emotionally impacted by.
That's
early on. It was like
quite the movie.
That's probably like where my wokeness comes from. Don't be mean to Uncle Remus. Come on, what's up with that?
Seems like they could kind of cut out some of the stuff, or I don't know.
Hard.
It's too hard. It's too hard. Okay.
It's the old South. But you know what's interesting is that a lot of the old Will Rogers movies are still around, and some of those are the most racist movies that still are available. Yeah. But let's talk about that for a second. It's a very complicated story when you start talking about Will Rogers and race, because you know his father was a Confederate officer, and
I did not know that.
Not only that, but he the man that taught him all the rope tricks was an African-American former slave that was there. So that's where he learned the rope tricks. And there's a film that he did, and I can't remember just right off the bat, but he's singing with a black woman, and they're singing a slave spiritual, and he's pulling it off. You know, so you get all that going on. But then if you know the Spike Lee movie Bamboozled, he uses a couple clips from one of the Will Rogers movies where it has the absolute worst depiction of a black man that you can find in American history of cinema history. Okay, so you got all that going on. Then when Will Rogers dies in the plane crash in South Central LA, in whatever that, and I don't know if it's Watts or wherever it is there in South Central LA, a lot of the black actors who worked in Hollywood lived. They had a parade for Will Rogers. They loved Will Rogers. The black actors did. Why was that? Because yes, they may have gotten these subservient roles that are complete negative depictions of people of African descent, but it was work, and he gave a lot of them work. And so on the one hand, there are these racist depictions of black people. On the other hand, you had the black people who were the actors having a parade in memory of Will Rogers because at least he got them into the industry. Not saying that the industry was good at that point. Remember Hattie McDaniel, I believe is her name. She got the award, but she couldn't go to the awards. There were no black people at the Academy Awards at that time. So here's an actual winner of an award who's African-American that can't go. So if I'm teaching American history or American cinema history to high school students, can I say that? Like, why was Hattie McDaniel kept away from the Academy Awards? Because she, like, I don't want to say anything negative, you know, because they didn't like whatever, you know. No, because she was black. You got to say it.
That is the
If
reason.
you're not, you know, or you can't just. There's a new movie. I just read about it this morning, and I can't remember the title of it, but it's set in Auschwitz. There's a German family, and they live not too far from the Auschwitz prisoner of war camp. And what it shows is this family is in this beautiful bucolic environment where they have a nice garden and flowers and all this stuff going on. But apparently the way the article describes it, way off in the distance, you can occasionally hear gunshots, or you might see some smoke. And what's that smoke? That smoke is the burning of Jewish people, their bodies. And so there's always this class of people who are disaffected by the horrors that are around them. And so I haven't seen this yet, so I don't know. But I can talk to anybody about any of this because I have been to Dachau. When I was stationed in Germany, I went to Dachau. I wanted to see it. I wanted to see a place where people were brought and killed. And I saw the ovens, and I saw the oven with the rose in it because they're just trying to remember that bodies were put in these ovens and incinerated. And this movie, there's a scene where the two guys are saying, yeah, we can do about 700 bodies a day. So that's real. That really happened. In addition to that, I've been to Hiroshima in Japan. I went there as a part of a DJ trip. But once there, we had a chance to go see, what do you want to go see? I was like, well, I want to go to Hiroshima. I want to see what that was about. And when you go to these places and you see what humans are capable of doing to other humans, I guess maybe if you're one kind of personality, it makes you think, boy, I can get away with all kinds of stuff, and I can be as nefarious as I want to be and really be an awful person and still somehow succeed. But contemporarily, that would never happen. Someone who's like a racist and a sexist and a misogynist and a narcissist, there's no way that everybody would know that about a person. Let's just say an accused criminal of many felonious crimes and all these, just negative things. Those kinds of people typically would not be accepted in gracious, educated society anymore. For the most part, I'm going to say 99.9% of the time. I'd say that if you're a base that kind of person reaches, then you fit into a certain demographic category, and I'm pretty much going to stop there. So you can go that way. Or the other thing is you become humble about being human and humble about what people will do to each other given the opportunity to accelerate power. Now, the World War II one, I think, is very complicated from a lay point of view because you're talking about two countries and you're talking about one country that's attacked another country and this country saying, hey, we're going to do this. But if you've seen the Oppenheimer film, there's lots of ethical concerns about that whole situation. So I think these are real serious issues that we continue to grapple with. And right now we're grappling with them at the educational level because supposedly there's things we can't teach to our young people in the public schools.
Everyone I've talked to, anyone I've talked to that has been to, like, especially a concentration camp and who has visited, I don't know if I've met anyone who didn't come away from it, like, being at least a little changed. And so, I think that's a weirdly beautiful thing of just, a lot can, standing in the spot can really just change someone's perspective.
Oh, no doubt about it. And so when you walk into the gates of Dachau, there's a sign, well, it's Iron Gate. And I don't remember if it's wrought iron that they made the sign that way or what, but it says Arbeit macht frei. And what that means is work makes you free. You're going to a labor camp. You're going to a work camp. If you come in here and work, you're going to be free. But they've left that up there. Arbeit macht frei. So what do we learn growing up? Oh, work hard and you'll be successful and, everything will be good. And there, the same concept. That changed my whole thinking about work making you anything, because it's a straight up lie that these people are coming in there. Arbeit macht frei. Oh, work will make you free. In fact, welcome to your death is what it's about. And the thing that really got me at Dachau was they had these buildings where the people live, which were like barracks type. They had one or two of them still set up, or maybe rebuilt, or I don't remember, but they were these long rectangular buildings where the people lived. And within the confines of Dachau, there were just rows and rows of them, of no buildings, just the foundations. They had them marked out. So you could see how many of these barracks were in this place that had people in them that were destined for death. And so I think when you see these kinds of things regarding humanity and history, that they broaden your perspective, not just about your own life, but all people's lives. So we have a very heavy Christian community here in Oklahoma, a very deep-seated of many different, types. And I've been to Jerusalem and Bethlehem and Nazareth, and I've seen those places and heard the stories and walked where Jesus walked and all that kind of thing. He was a real person. There's no doubt about that whatsoever, in my mind anyway. And most everybody pretty much accepts historically that a person called Jesus contemporarily existed. But just going there, it makes it not just a Sunday school story or just a Bible story or just a play on Christmas. When you go to the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem and there's the altar and you walk down some steps underneath the altar and you go down below. And why is that? Because that's where when there was the inn was there, that's where they kept the animals, because the heat rises from the animals and it keeps the building upstairs warm. So that was the only place they could go. It wasn't like a barn off to the side. It was underneath where they kept the animals. And so that's where they venerate the birthplace of Jesus, is downstairs in this grotto underneath the altar there of the Church of Nativity. So once you go to a place like that and you kind of see the physical history of the place, it makes everything more real. And whatever your belief or faith is, that's something separate from the historical documentation of a place or a thing or an idea or something like that. And that's what that's done for me over the years, is by going to these places, whether it's Dachau or the Great Pyramids of Giza or the Acropolis in Athens, Greece, or the Roman Colosseum, or the Vatican, the Eiffel Tower, the Tower of London, where all these places are that I was fortunate to travel because I was in the military, and then I worked for the military, and then I had other opportunities to travel, and I just took the chance, because it is a chance anytime you go internationally, and they give you perspective on what it means. We're here for a short time, really. You hear that all the time. It's a short life. We should get as much out of it as while we can, but we get tired and we want to relax sometimes. And yet it does go really quickly. Here I am sitting at age 62. What? How did that happen? Just like, seems like yesterday I was in the 688 Club with RuPaul.
Wow.
Great reference.
Just for anyone who's wondering what that is.
Oh, yeah.
Check out our
Patreon.
You
have to unlock that story by
right.
subscribing to our Patreon at patreon.com/KThomas.
It's the hidden track.
It's a hidden track.
The amazing story
It's
with
a
RuPaul.
really great story.
Right.
My friend RuPaul.
Yeah. And you had to know that long history of friendship by going to the
story.
To the bonus
but
track.
all that to say, these things give us perspective. And I get perspective in Oklahoma all the time. And that's the thing is, right now, we're on Cherokee Nation Reservation. Okay, we're at Rogers State University. We're in Claremore, Oklahoma, the state property and all that. But we are on the reservation. Well, that's a whole new concept for a lot of people. And it freaked a lot of people out, and it's still freaking a few people out. But there's a lot to put together as a result of it. What do we do now? And it takes compromise. It takes working together and giving a little bit so you can get a little bit. The yard sale philosophy. You're the seller at the yard sale. You put 50 cents on there, but you'll take a quarter. And so if you're a yard sale buyer, you walk up and you instantly say, I'll give you a quarter. I mean, that's you're not getting what you asked, but you're getting at least half of what you asked, and then the other person's getting that thing out of your house. So you don't have to deal with it anymore, and they gave you a quarter.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I mean, we have a whole long list of things. You printed out this thing for me with a bunch of
I just printed that out because I thought, okay, here's the thing. I'm going to talk to these guys, and like we call it the Vita, right? The Vita, it's like sort of semi-embarrassing because there's too much stuff on it. So somebody says, "Oh, you send me your Vita?" I'm like, okay, here you go. But really, what it's broken down into, that's your education and what you did in your education, what your additional education is besides your degrees, and then on top of that, what courses you teach, and then what's your academic expertise, and then finally, what have you done with it? What's your scholarship? And for me, it's writing, it's publishing, it's producing audiovisual materials, it's all of that. And then it's presentation. So like a few pages of that are just like people have asked me to talk over the years, and we're supposed to keep track of it. Wow. So when my memorial service is, hopefully many years from now, put this thing out there. It's like, he sure got around a lot and talked to a lot of people.
We'll play this podcast in its entirety.
Yeah, you're right. Just let it roll. But the mascot era provided lots of talks, and I do lots of talks on Oklahoma music because that's really what brought me back to Oklahoma in a lot of ways. When I was in New York, I had homesickness, and every time I came back to Oklahoma, it just looked nicer and nicer every time because you live in New York City for a while. It's a gritty place, and it's the kind of thing where I don't even know. Well, I won't go into that part right now, but it is a gritty place because there's so many people packed in a small area. As what I said earlier, it's like a big small town. So everybody's.
When were you there?
1985 to 90 is really when I lived there, and then I lived outside of New York City around 1982 when I very first got out of the Army, and then I was there for a summer before I went into the Army because my father lived there. And so that's kind of how I got connected.
I don't think we mentioned, were you born in Oklahoma? Were you raised here?
I was raised here, but I was not born here. So I was born, for the record, I was born in Philadelphia at a Navy hospital because my father was in the Navy. And so, but
glad we have that on the record.
Yeah. So my mother's family is from Oklahoma and my father's family is from Texas.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, my mother's family moved down to the Dallas area or in Dallas. And then that's where my mother and father met there in high school.
And then at some point they moved back to Oklahoma.
Well, essentially what happened was my mother and father divorced when I was very young. And so as a result of that, my mother came back here. And so this is where we more or less started over again. And so I went to the first grade here, and then we moved back to Texas, and I came back here in the 5th grade. I went to 5th and 6th grade, Hulbert Elementary.
Oh.
And I went to the 7th.
Hulbert Riders.
Hulbert Riders.
Speed trap of the Oklahoma.
Well, yeah. If you know it's there, you don't get caught in it. But a lot of good memories of Hulbert. And then I went to junior high in Wagner, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade in Wagner, Mighty Bulldogs. And
this is where my family's from.
Wagner,
Hulbert, all that,
and then I went to Muskogee High School, and then I left the day after graduation, and I moved to Houston. And within a few weeks, I was a water ski show announcer at Astroworld, as I mentioned earlier.
Wow,
ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's water ski show water ski show time at Astroworld.
Wow, Astroworld of all places.
A lot of history of music in Muskogee.
Yeah, now that's a whole nother subject with regard to Muskogee. So when I was in New York and going to school there and had my little bit of homesickness, I started looking for Oklahoma stuff. And I was talking to a journalist named Robert Palmer, who was a longtime Rolling Stone writer, and he wrote a really good book called Deep Blues. Actually, yeah, he did write for Rolling Stone, but he wrote a book called Deep Blues. And that book is about the story of Robert Johnson and kind of how Mississippi Delta blues came to influence a lot of early rock and all of that. Well, he was in a band for a while, and they came to New York, and he played clarinet with this band. There was like a young people's rock band.
But I played in elementary.
Playing clarinet. There you go. So you can relate. That's a squawking instrument. It can really bring the house down if played appropriately.
Yeah, it's an interesting.
Yeah. So all that to say, I was talking to him, and I think it's in his book. No, I'm not going to say that. Well, anyway, I was talking to him. I was saying he was from Oklahoma, and he said, "Oh, you know about the Oklahoma City Blue Devils?" And I said, "No, I don't know anything. I don't know." Well, they're this great territory band. I was like, "What's a territory band?" And he said, they're really the beginnings of the Count Basie Orchestra. And I was like, really? And I was, okay. So I started looking into them. And alongside that, my father was living in outside of Manhattan, a place called Rye Brook, New York, which is close to Port Chester. And he had a bunch of old jazz books because he was a drummer. And I was looking through his jazz books, and I kept seeing Muskogee as the birthplace of these jazz musicians. I was like, God, I went to Muskogee High School. I didn't hear anything about jazz musicians from Muskogee, nor did I hear anything about territory bands. And so I started looking into this. And it turns out that there's this incredible music history here in Oklahoma from many angles, but just starting with the territory band tradition and the black musical tradition that came out of Oklahoma, and how many of these musicians went on to Kansas City and then went on either to California or New York and became big. So the more I started looking into it, I found that Muskogee had more internationally recognized jazz musicians that were born and raised there than any other community its size in the United States.
Wow.
And so I thought, why is that? Mm-hmm. And so I started looking into it and trying to come up with a reason why. Well, it all starts with Muskogee Creek Nation. And it goes, next place is Muskogee Creek people that had slaves of African descent that came with them on removal. And so now you have a removed class of African Americans, people of African descent, black people in that Muskogee area. And then after the Civil War, when the blacks are, quote, freed, then a black community started to grow there that was completely independent of the white communities of that area. And that's why we had the Black Town movement in Oklahoma, which that led me to that as well. But in Muskogee, there was a landed middle class of African Americans, lawyers, doctors, newspapers, shopkeepers. Schools were really good, all that stuff. So you had an insular black community similar to Greenwood. Mm-hmm. Yep. As a matter of fact, when the riots started to happen, some of the Greenwood parents put their kids on the train to Muskogee because they knew they'd be safe there, because Muskogee was such a black stronghold. Wow. So I started looking at all this and started tracking down the musicians. And at that time, before that, I just started looking at other music from Oklahoma, and I remember the Flaming Lips were from Oklahoma, and they were just out at that time in college radio. We played them in college radio. Chainsaw Kittens, same thing. And so I was really kind of into that alternative side of music at that time. And so that made me want to come back to Oklahoma and tell the story, figure out what happened, So I did, and I learned all this. The dissertation, I used it for my dissertation. Origins, development, critical significance of jazz from Muskogee, Oklahoma. Why, A, did all these musicians come from here? B, how did they do, and how are they perceived critically by the jazz music history establishment? And anytime you can get an academic question like that, you're in good shape. Well, alongside of all of that, I'll go to the next place, which is, I met a Muskogee woman with whom I fell in love, and we got married and had our son. And as a result of that, I started getting involved in the Muskogee world. And I started attending Muskogee Creek Baptist Church, Hutchie Indian Baptist Church, of which I am a member. And this is the story that comes out. I'm not sure on the screen here. You don't have to zoom out or anything, a little wider. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got a couple posters up here. I think this one is for, that's one of Sterling's posters, Barking Water. What's the other one? This may be the last time. There we go, this one. That's for the film. So this film, Barking Water, I did not know Sterling when this came out, but I contacted him and to see if he would come up and show it on campus here, like a student film showing type thing. Or not student film, but his film to show to the campus and everything. So he did. So he came up here and we showed the film, but our projection system was messed up. It wouldn't go widescreen. It was only showing like the 3x4 size. And so he said, I can't watch this. I'm going to go sit outside. I was like, okay, well, you're the film guy, so I'm going to go sit out there with you. So I went out. We were just sitting on the front steps of the auditorium. And Sterling tells a story a little different than I do because we have different memories about it, but it's normal. And so I said, I really liked how you put Muskogee hymns in This May Be the Last Time, because there's a couple in there. Or no, I'm sorry. I liked how you put a couple Muskogee hymns in Barking Water. And And of course, his response immediately to me, he being of that community and from that area, essentially, well, what do you know? Well, like, A, what do you know? Why do you know about Muskogee hymns? And so I just told him what I had learned through my research of going to Muskogee Creek Baptist Church and singing the songs and asking questions and looking into the history of them. And that film tells the story. This may be the last time. And so that sort of enhanced the whole significance of Oklahoma music history, because in Muskogee Creek hymns, you have really the first tricultural product that's an artistic product between the three major cultures of the early United States that emerged in Muskogee Creek hymns. What I mean is those songs were brought by Scottish missionaries. They then took the melodies of African Americans, and then they put it in the language of Muskogee Creek people, and those lyrics often have a double meaning. So they start to emerge in the early 1800s, and when I say early 1800s, I mean like 1800, because the first missionary doesn't make it down there until 1796. When I say there, Alabama and Georgia. So when the Muskogee people removed, they brought these songs with them, and so they still sing them today. And so you can hear some of them, they sound like African-American spirituals. And so that was my question, was like, why are contemporary Muskogee Creek people singing African-American spirituals? Well, that took me back 200 years of American music history. That became super fascinating to me, and by extension to Sterling, who then said, well, we should make a movie. And so we did. And that was the year I got to go to Sundance in that one, and that was a fun experience in itself. But just getting to go, and I was sort of the talking head academic. There was a couple of others on there, but that's how that story evolved. So first I had the whole Muskogee jazz thing, and then with Sterling's invitation and work, then it became all about Muskogee hymns for a little while. And so I've been fortunate to just kind of, because I'm from here and I left for a while, I can recognize the significance of the things that are here. Whereas when you grow up around it all the time, it just seems familiar. Yeah, so what? Those are songs Grandma sings on Sunday.
Yeah.
But not putting them in the context of American music history that gives them a very prominent and significant place.
So I have two questions, and they both relate to what you've been talking about. So the first one is this all the reason, like you being gone and then learning all this, is that what got you really into Native American and like maybe meeting your wife and stuff? Is that what prompted your I don't know, movement into being really invested into Native American studies and issues? And then the other one is, I believe you're also a founder of Music, the Oklahoma
Music Hall of Fame.
Music, yes. I didn't want to. Is this also the story you just like related?
Not so much. Here, what I'm going to say, as best I can do on that whole situation, is, when you're married and you're in a family, you tend to do the things a family does. Mm-hmm. And so that was that track. I already had the Oklahoma music thing going, but I did not have the Native part of it. I did not understand powwows, for example. And so if you're an inquisitive person, you want to find out more about things that you're interested in. And so when you start to talk about Native American music, most people do not have a grasp of it. And even within the communities, there are certain people who really do, and then there's some people who don't. But there's so much diversity among Native people and Native music. It's a huge body of knowledge to try and get your head around. And so I always found myself just learning more and more, and I kept learning more. Okay, we'll back up just for a second. So it wasn't just the family part. I worked for NBC News for a year, and I was a radio news reporter for a year. And so I had that journalist skill. Mm-hmm. And so when I was approached with the television prospect in 1998 from our RSU, Diana Lurs, our former department head, I said, well, are there any limitations? Can I go around and interview people and put it on the air? And she goes, well, is that okay with your IRB requirements, the Institutional Research Board? If you're doing research, you're supposed to go through this board and get it all cleared. If you're doing organized research, meaning you have a system set up to ask everybody the same set of questions, you're looking for this data and so forth. The only thing you don't have to go through the IRB for is journalism. So if you're just doing a straight up current events news interview, then that's not considered an IRB because it's not predetermined. It's not a systematized study. Organized study is what they call it. Organized research is what they call it. So based on my experience in the military as a public affairs person, and then my experience as a news person, I knew that tribes had to have some kind of public liaison person, whether that's the education department or a true public affairs department or whatever it is. I would just call and say, do you have someone that I could talk to on camera about the current events of the tribe? And they would put it off on somebody. Sometimes it would be the chairperson. Sometimes it would be the education coordinator. Sometimes it would be the cultural director. Sometimes it would just be somebody they could find to do it. Here comes another person that wants to find out about us, And so one of the questions I would always ask would be about the music. That was maybe the most organized it was. What's going on contemporarily? How's the language doing? And what's happening with the music? And then I'd always get some information that would help me down the road a little bit. And so then I started looking into it more. Then I just started going a lot. And to generate content for my television class, I would go out and video record powwows. And I'd bring them back and put them on TV and talk about them. Okay, here's why this song's being sung now. Here's what this regalia means in a general way as best as I can tell you. Here's how this dance is structured and where it comes from. Now watch it. So when you go to a powwow, at least now you'll know the difference between northern singing and southern singing and what a fancy dance is and what a straight dance is and so forth. And so it just started to feed into all of my music work. And so it wasn't so much now I'm fascinated and I have to just go find everything out about Native people, because I learned very quickly that that's not really your role, especially as a non-Native. And it's more to get the tribe's point of view out and let them say what they want to say. So instead of me teaching about a tribe, it's a tribe teaching about a tribe, and I'm the catalyst that gets it out on the air. So the more that just started to build, the more, well, early on what was happening in the Muskogee jazz history, I went to the Muskogee Public Library and I was looking at old newspapers there where I was learning about the early black history of Muskogee, which is very interesting, and there should be a movie made about it. And so when I was doing that, the librarian asked me what I was up to. I told him. He contacted somebody else at the newspaper who then called me and asked me what I was doing. I'm doing this research on Muskogee jazz. Did a story on me. It was on the front page of the Muskogee Phoenix. And within another couple of days, I got a call from a guy named Tony Kai, who's no longer here, who was with the, I think it's called the Greater Muskogee Development Corporation or Foundation or Muskogee Development, an entity that works on bringing business to town and so forth. And he said, I saw the article in your paper, or in the paper, and we're talking about an Oklahoma Music Hall of Fame, and we wondered if you'd come down and talk with us about it. Okay. I was, in the time I was living in Muskogee. And so I said, okay. So I went down and they told me what they were doing. And then I just started talking, and they're like, well, you got to be, with us on the board or whatever. Okay, that's fine. So I think I believe the first vice president, and I'm a founder, and I've been the chair of the induction selection committee this whole time. So I've seen all the inductees go in, and I've overseen the process of how it happens. And then I also make the biographical videos for each inductee. So I take the script and I do the voiceover, and then I get all the images and I put those on a track, and then I make them move because Ken Burns messed us up, and now we have to make every image move. And then I put whatever music goes with it, put the titles in there, and then that's played before they're inducted. And then typically I MC the event. So I go, like this one coming up here, whenever this airs, happened in February. And so I go and, do the talking and be the MC, and then the videos play and we give them the awards and all that. Then we have the museum down there in Muskogee, which is an old train station, the Frisco Depot, and we have a lot of live events there, and people rent it out for weddings and civic events and so forth. And then there's an area that's the Hall of Fame with all the pictures of the people who've been inducted. And then there's a little museum area where you can look at artifacts and watch a video that I did on, the history of Oklahoma music. And so it's complete volunteer effort.
Wow.
I've never gotten a dime to do any of it. It's always been just because I wanted to. I also have this book, which I don't have in here right now, but it's a 828-page book called Oklahoma Music Guide, and it's full. And right now I'm editing to try and get a new one printed in the new year, but I've hit a point where it's full. And the publisher says you can't have any more pages. 828 is all you get.
Wow.
So you either have to take something out and put something in, or leave it as it is, or whatever.
Find a different publisher.
You know, well, they just can't. It's already like this big.
Wow.
So that book, hopefully this next edition, I'd like to get it out and then work on some other stuff. So that's
break it up into two different books, maybe.
Possibly
book one, book two.
But there's a point where somebody else has to take it over,
Right?
Because the whole thing is every article I see or things on the internet or whatever, I'm always printing them out. I've got a notebook in there where everything's alphabetized of like, oh, well, so and so died. I got to go in and put their death date in the book, and then
wow.
Or somebody released a new album, I got to do that, or the Hosty, his film came out, the Oklahoma Breakdown, that's done so well, so I need to go add that. And so usually the entry's already written, and I go to the end and maybe tack on a little bit of whatever just happened. But every time you tack on 2 or 3 lines, it moves it. And so now you kind of like, what am I going to take out of this one? Put those there, or let me make all the pictures smaller. Let me take the double spaces out after every period, make it just one space. I gain some room that way. But that's
make the periods like a font size font lower.
Right. Point. Everybody like I don't know if you know the OED, the Oxford English Dictionary. If you get one, it comes with a magnifying glass because it's so big. It's 2 volumes. You open it up, and the print's so small. You got to take the magnifying glass out of the little drawer and look at it and see the history of the word, water, or whatever.
So it really sounds like a lot of your work is all connected, and
Definitely.
your work led you to the other part, which led you to more, and it became a big hole of just you were widening the hole of content.
That's why I got tasked with my current job, which is being department head of communications, fine arts, and Native American studies.
Wow.
So I've got those 3 areas over which I have supervision. And I didn't, with regard to department head, and this is like academic talk, there's 3 kinds, right? There's the climber. There's the one who wants to use it to get to a higher position. And then there's the person who is a sunsetter. They've worked hard enough. They don't even want to do anything else. They don't want to write anymore. They just want to finish out as department head. And then there's the so-called passive chair, which is somebody who did not ask for it, but was more or less put up to it because nobody else would. And that is me. I'm the passive chair, right? I'm like, otherwise, I'd be in the other office over there and just doing my work and out of here. Like normally, a professor's life, I'm not here right now. I'm already, writing Christmas cards, building the fire, and putting ornaments on my little tree. Wow. But now I'm here in the office because I got to be here every day. Since I'm a state employee, you have to be here 8 to 5, Governor, every day. So that's the story. But it does all feed, and that's the whole idea of liberal arts education. Is that everything comes together, that you may be studying literature over here and history over here and psychology over here, and then one day you have this epiphanical moment where you realize it all goes together. I'm able to say something smarter because I've read this book, listened to this person talk about history, learned about the past of psychology, and I took Humanities 1, so I realized we're not the first people on the planet here, in the last few years.
Great class, Humanities, especially at RSU.
Yeah, Humanities 1, everybody really should have Humanities 1, Humanities 2, but if some people took it, be like, this class is too woke. All right, it's too. You can't say those things.
This episode's most likely going to be called Dr. Hugh Foley Goes Woke.
Goes woke. It should be. Yeah, it should be. Wake people up a little bit. And that's where it comes from. Where the whole woke thing, as I looked into the history of it, of course, it comes out of black jargon. And it goes back to the time of people traveling around. What was the movie? The book, the color book, the Green Book, the Green Book, where black people had certain places they could stay as they traveled, and it kind of told them where
the safe places would be. Yeah.
Well, along that went, stay woke. Don't just stop anywhere. Stay awake. Basically that was the concept. So stay woke, and not. I don't have anything really to say much about urban English that becomes Black English, or however you want to describe that. But that's where it comes from. It just comes from the Black community. Stay aware is what it means. Be aware. What do you tell your kids when they get in the car for the first time and driving somewhere? Be careful, right? Like stay alert. You know, which is essentially what that is. And then as time goes on, it goes on to mean other things, which is essentially to be aware and be observant of your environment and be careful. Whereas it's gotten twisted around now to being the new PC. If you're woke, you're PC. Well, others would say, like in Humphrey Bogart, when he says in Casablanca, which we did in cinema, you know, always have to do that one.
Yeah.
Well, at the end, he's talking to, I think he's talking to Sam there in about the middle of the movie. He goes, well, you know, I bet they're asleep in America. I bet they're asleep all over America. You know, he essentially was saying is they're not aware of the danger that's coming to them.
Yeah.
And because the Casablanca is set just before Pearl Harbor. So it's set so that it can set all that up.
And I just love, I mean, that was one, I'm glad you brought that up. That was one of the ones I watched where you were talking about Casablanca. And that sort of I love that movie. It's one of my favorite films. And I had never really thought of it from that sort of perspective that Humphrey Bogart's character is sort of the representation of America during that time. The sort of not wanting to be not whatever what was it called where you're not
he's an isolationist.
Isolationist.
I stick my neck out for nobody is his thing.
Yes,
isolationist. But then by the end, Ilsa tells him, Rick, you have to think for all of us, and that's not just the people in the narrative of the movie. She's saying,
think for America,
everybody. And so he gets involved, and he says back, or Victor, the hero figure in there, says, "Welcome back to the fight." At the end, you know, I know this time our side will win, and so it's kind of a propagandist type thing that's going on there. But at the same time, it just brings up this concept that people would rather not be awake sometimes, and that goes to I can't remember the name of this current film that I read about this morning that you're going to hear more about. I think it's a British film, and that has these people that live near Auschwitz that are in their sort of happy world, and while this, you know, horrible stuff is going on over here, they're just kind of going along and doing their thing.
Well, I think modern society's made us comfortable and everything. People want to live in comfort and don't want to allow anything in that makes them uncomfortable in any way.
Right, unsettled.
Yeah, unsettled, you know. So, yeah. With all that you have going on, do you have a problem saying no to things, or do you just take everything on? How do you...
I've had to learn. It's kind of calendar driven.
Yeah.
So I look at the calendar and say, I can't do it that day because I'm doing this or that. Or what's also happened because of my production schedule. So, for example, the Oklahoma Music Hall of Fame's the middle of February, and I have to do 7 videos for them. And the videos are about 5 minutes each. And as you know, video production, I mean, just very conservative on what I'm doing is an hour per minute. So you think, well, there's 35, 40 hours I know that I'm going to have occupied between now or January 1st and February 15th. So if somebody contacts me and says, can you come do whatever, I will sometimes be able to say, well, I have a production right now. I just can't do that. I need that 5-hour window at night after I get off work here to do the videos. And so a few things like that. But it's back to the Roy Clark thing. I'm just trying to embrace people that want me to talk, and because you know what's funny is like I do so much stuff. You see the list there. It's like I just talk, and I have my.
Should we show the paper off to the camera?
Yeah, no, you can, but it's just like it's like that's your curriculum vitae. Maybe they say it that way. Yeah. So, but all that to say, let's see, which way are we going with that?
Just
I know. Yeah. I get, I get so many opportunities to speak, and I'm happy about that. And I've talked plenty, and I'm a teacher, so I get to talk all the time, and I'm on TV, and I get to do radio, and the football games. I love doing high school football games on the radio, but I've taken it over. So I do I'd read the commercials. I do the whole half by myself. Wow. I just keep it there. And then I throw it back to the station at halftime. And then they play some spots in music. And they throw it back to me at the second half. And then I just take the whole second half because it's like talking for an hour and a half. And I just enjoy it. I just really have a good time. And I'll take that one step further. In the pandemic, I didn't want to be in the press boxes because I didn't want to be up there and, you know, just everything. Nobody knew what was happening really. So I decided to go down on the field, and I took a headset, a remote Bluetooth headset, connected to my phone, called the station. They put me on the air. And then at the same time, I shoot video. So like I'm calling and I'm on the field. So I'm on the field. I have a camera on a monopod with the, viewfinder open. And so I'm calling the game and I'm shooting video. And when the game's all over and I get back to the house on the weekend, I edit that up and that becomes a highlight video that I then upload on Monday. And this is all just because I want to. All right. It's like no other reason really. But it started because I didn't want to be in the press box in the pandemic. And I just have the ability to do it. I'd say sometimes my play-by-play suffers because I'm shooting video. Sometimes my video suffers because I'm shooting play-by-play. But we're talking Class 4A high school football. All right. It's not like ESPN or anything. But it was a unique perspective of having your play-by-play guy on the field. And I don't think I've seen that happen anywhere else, because typically you
still stay on the field?
Yeah,
Still, wow.
After the pandemic, because I liked it so much down there. Because you get to hear what's happening with the teams and the players talking and what the refs are saying, and occasionally you can ask a ref a question. And I just like being, I like being down there around it.
Why'd you make that call?
Yeah, what? Really? Exactly. I didn't think you could do that. So,
have you been tackled yet? Have you gotten any close calls?
Only one. And I was able to get out of the way. And the player we had last year goes, "You all right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, everything's good." But I always said to those guys, there was a film in the 70s maybe, and it was about a football player who ran over a photographer.
Oh, God.
And like really almost killed him or something. It was a movie that was made about him.
Oh.
And so there was all this guilt the player had, and the guy that got run over. I don't remember what that was about, or the name of the movie anyway. But that hasn't happened to me. I've always said, well, now that I'm down here, I'm 62, as I mentioned earlier. If there's ever a point where I feel in jeopardy or like I don't belong down here anymore, I'll go back to the press box and sit up there with all the other people who are just sitting there, the reporters and people who run the clock and the PA guy and all that. But I like being down on the field. So what I was going to say is that I get a lot of chance to talk. And as you guys can see and know already, because you know my classes, I can go on and on and on. But what always happens is around December now, if nobody's asked me to do anything yet for the spring, I hit January like, oh, nobody loves me anymore. I'm not booked for anything. But that rarely happens. But just like a moment. And then within a week of getting back to school, the emails and the phones and my calendar's all full, and all the way till, I have events planned till next July now, so... Yeah. It's just how it goes.
Too much love.
Yeah, so it's good.
Wish people do not like me anymore.
Back to Roy Clark. I'm thankful, because if they didn't want me to talk, then I'd just be, sitting around working on my augmented triads on my guitar.
You got any questions for Foley?
No, I got the ones that I had. 14 pages, by the way.
Man, one-sided.
Yeah.
Yeah, one side. So
Is this the opening of your book?
No, actually, that's just a required reading for anybody who's going to talk to me.
Yeah,
That's what I take to speed dating.
Yeah,
here.
Okay.
And instantly.
Yeah.
That's where we,
Can you tell me about this talk you did?
Right in 1998 about mascots.
Yeah.
No, I'll stop that joke. The thing about when you get older, I'll tell you guys this: your filter tends to go down, and so that's why older people say kind of outrageous things, because they've lost their filter. So what I'm still trying to keep a hold of is my filter as long as I can, so I don't say anything too. I don't want to get canceled before I retire.
One of my favorite interviews ever is they interviewed Quincy Jones, some newspaper, just like, I don't know, not that many years ago. And, and he was very old, and he's just like saying things that should not be said about all sorts of people he's worked with Michael Jackson, and he talks about Marlon Brando and Richard Pryor, just all these different things that are like, oh, that's not public record, and things, and it's just out there.
Right.
And
so we might come back to you in like 10, 15 years.
Yeah, whenever you're ready. Just
I'll tell you, I was just
anything.
Coming here this morning, I stopped at a little diner in Locust Grove, and as I was coming in, this elderly gentleman was walking out, and he was coming down the stairs, and I saw he had a World War II hat on. You don't see too many guys wearing like World War II veteran hats. And he was coming down real slow, and so I was just waiting for him. Morning, sir. How you doing today? Like, I'm not too good. And I was like, oh, what's the problem? He goes, oh, my sciatica. And I was like, oh, well, hope it gets better. He goes, yeah, me too. So I always tell people, I lived through the Depression and World War II and, my whole life. And here I am 90 years old, and my sciatica is what's going to get me. And I was like, A, you're a World War II veteran. B, you're 98 years old. C, you got a little back problem. I can understand that. But then he just sort of slowly goes and gets in this pickup truck, climbs into it, and drives off. I'm like, okay, I hope I'm rolling around with a little back pain at 98.
If I'm doing that good at 98, if I'm good enough to drive in my 90s.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. Because they say and this is for people down the road somewhere, 70s are your go-go years, your 80s are your slow-go years, and your 90s are your no-go years. Is what I've said, or what I've heard anyway. I don't know if it's really true. Not for that guy.
No.
Yeah.
He's still going
He's
at
still
98.
going.
Yeah. But I don't think he's taking any, road trips to Big Sur or anything.
Yeah, not like I did. Not like I do every time I come down here.
Yeah. Well, we always like kind of ending the thing with advice. I guess, would you have any advice people wanting to go into academia or just any of your pursuits of just advice you would have?
Well, that's, for me, because early on, maybe your parents or whoever are looking out for you and they want you to do something that's going to be financially remunerative, and because they don't want to worry about you. They want you to be okay, and they want you to have a place to stay and food and a vehicle if you need it, and for life to be okay for you. And so I think that we get directed early on in those ways. What's going to get us a job? How are we going to survive? And I think that that's an important pursuit. But back to the Three Idiots movie, if you're not happy with what you're doing, you can endure just about anything for a little while if you have to. But over the long haul, we do have to be somewhat content with what it is that we choose to do every day. And when I come to work here, I never have one moment of regret or hesitation. I'm excited literally as soon as I pull the door open of the building outside, and if not when I drive in the facility, because I really like working here. I like the job that I do. I like the people that I work with, and I like working with students and young people who are on their way. And so with regard to encouragement, that's the really hard thing to do, is to find something that you really anticipate doing, or is at least a vehicle to get you where you want to go in your non-work life. Is it providing you enough sustenance so you can take your road trip or find your little happy place wherever it is, or acquire whatever object it is that you think you need that will make you happy? And so I think that that's the real challenging thing that we all have to figure out, is what can we do that will make us happy, that will provide us the income we need to be able to do what we want. Not everybody has that privilege, because sometimes you grow up in an environment that does not allow you that kind of privilege. And that's a hard thing to overcome, but it can be overcome because we are resilient. And this last semester, I taught a concurrent class of high school students in Pryor. I taught an intro to speech class for those students. I really liked it, and because they were all 16, 17 years old. And overall, a very positive, forward-looking mindset in all those students. Now, when you're working with concurrent high school students, they're kind of the honor students of a high school, I think, because they've got enough going where okay, I'm going to take a college class while I'm still in high school. So it's not every high school student, but it's these students anyway. And one of the students, I think it was an argumentative essay or argumentative speech. And one of the students said, well, I want to argue that nothing matters.
Oh, okay.
And I'm like, okay, well, coming from a 16-year-old, all right, how'd you get to this point? Excuse me. Well, all these things, just seem like they don't matter. I said, well, do you know what nihilism is? And she said, no. And I said, well, look that up, and then let's talk here on my next time around the class to see if that's really what you want to argue about. So she looked up nihilism. I got back to her. I said, so you know, argue about nihilism? Nothing. No, that's a little too deep for me. You know, she said, and I think I'm going to pick something else. You know, and okay, well, that's, you know, good, because that's what you want to do, is you want to get people going. Well, then what she talked about was the past, and how the past weighs heavy on us, and how can we move beyond the past, and how can we move past a past reputation or something that we've done that people still hold against us, and that kind of thing, and or something that's happened to us that's negative that we just can't shake. And I said, well, look up resilience theory. And what's resilience theory? It's that we all have that ability as humans to be resilient, because bad things are going to happen to us. And the older you get, the more bad things happen. And it's not just financial issues, but it's those things we don't expect. People that die that we don't expect to die at that moment. And so it's a shock, not only because they're dead, but because they were so young at the time, or it was not their fault, or, you know, they were involved in a tragic accident, or, you know, we just went through this COVID era that I think probably our whole country has a little PTSD from the whole situation, that it might take a little while to still yet get over. And so I'm kind of going down a lot of tracks here, but when you talk about encouragement for these fields, well, with regard to radio, television, communications, multimedia, a person now has to be able to do it all. Mm-hmm. If you're going to succeed, you have to know your audio, you have to know your video. Look at you guys in here, you're well trained. You must have gone to a good university, right? Right, you got your monitor here. You got your
State University.
Right. Multiple mic inputs. You got two cameras, a little switcher here, right? So it's all good. You know, I think and that is what a person needs to be able to do, is be multifaceted and multi-talented. When I went in college in the 80s and had intro to mass comm, or whatever it was called back then, that professor was talking about convergence. Mm-hmm. And convergence is all of the different media streams coming into one device. Mm-hmm. So what do we have here? You know, we have a device that all of it's in here.
Yeah.
And with the development of AI, I would also encourage people to learn as much as you can about AI, because you can like it or not, or you can be stuck in 20th century thinking like, oh, this is evil and going to take over the world. Or you can look at it as this incredible science fiction-like tool that's sitting there for us to use. Oh, but it's going to take away jobs from graphic designers and photographers and reporters and news people and accountants and middle management people and people who make spreadsheets and blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, there aren't any motion picture projector operators around anymore either, but they're still movies. Mm-hmm. So we have to kind of be able to roll with these changes, because they're happening very fast. And we have a society that in a lot of ways is built on 20th century and way earlier ideals, concepts, and philosophies. But we're living in a 22nd century technological situation right now. And it's moving very fast. If we made a policy today about it, it'd be different tomorrow. Mm-hmm. So I encourage everybody to just keep learning about AI. The other thing I would encourage people to do in the music world is play music and play an instrument. Listen to music and support musicians, especially by going to see them live and buying their merchandise. Streaming doesn't help anybody, to be honest, because there's really not much money to be made there. Where musicians make their money is from when you go see them and when you buy their stuff. So I encourage people to support musicians, local music, but then next level up is learning to play something yourself. There's a tremendous amount of intellectual, spiritual, physical benefit from playing a musical instrument. And so I encourage that. And I think there's two different ways to go. One, you can just be a good musician, play anything anybody else plays, or you can be a creative artist and make your own stuff up, and that engages different parts of your brain. And so I would encourage that. I would also encourage personal scholarship of your family. In the same way that y'all are talking to me today, you should also be talking to your grandma and your grandpa and your mom and your dad and other people in your family about their life and what happened in their life and how they got, because everybody has a story. And because I've been in the media my entire life, I started in radio when I was 16. I'm 62 now. So that's 46 years. So I've had multiple experiences that feed all my stories. Just because you meet somebody famous doesn't mean you know them, number one. But number two, by meeting somebody famous, you learn something from them that you can then share with other people. So I would openly say, I'd never met Garth Brooks until this past fall. I was in an event. He was at the event, and we were both in the same area. And
he never like stayed the night with you or anything.
Never slept on my floor. Didn't really need to at that point.
And if you want to understand that story, you should
check out this hidden track at the beginning of this whole thing. But here's what I would say about Garth is he was very welcoming to everybody that was in that little circle. And of course, you know, it's Garth Brooks. So it was like, oh, I wanted to shake hands, say hi, take a selfie, and oh, good, I met Garth Brooks, yay. But I was interested in just talking to him a little bit, if I could. Everybody wants to visit with him, but I had like maybe a couple minutes there to talk to him, and he was just very friendly and sincere, and told a story about a music history thing. And then I mentioned to him that, I've been in radio a long time, so I've played music since the very beginning, and still do, and at a station that I have. And when I said that, he just gave me a real sincere look and handshake. Well, thank you very much. And he was just a very sincere person. And he just seemed like that. The guy's obviously a multimillionaire and the biggest selling artist in popular music history and all of that, but he just seemed really sincere, like another Oklahoma guy. He just had that kind of feel about him, like somebody that you would run into at the feed store or something like that. Although, don't let that fool you necessarily, because he's a very smart person. I think his degrees in marketing from OSU, he's a very skilled person. He's also a very good musician and a good performer and good entertainer and all those things. I mean, he really is the whole package. But alongside that, I have met some celebrities over the years who I did not think were quite as gracious, and I certainly won't mention their names. But because a person gets to a certain level,
but it makes such good content, Dr.
It did, yeah. So that's
maybe in 10 years we'll
right.
We'll
that's the triple bonus.
Yeah. When you're in your 90s, we'll bring you back in.
Right, and talk about. Not quite. My filter's still high enough to not say it right now. And all of those were contextual. There were certain time, and I think that maybe not enough people are given credit for. And I don't want to get in this thing of like, oh, it's so difficult being a celebrity, because I don't know what it's like to be in LA and being like a young actress or actor everybody wants a photograph of, and the paparazzi's following you around everywhere. And
being a Taylor Swift or being Cade Thomas or Alex Clare, we're going to have vastly different experiences.
Oh, that's tough because they're millionaires and they get all this attention. But I know that it can wear you down a little bit if you're just constantly spun around and shaking hands and selfie, and you just go. And then when it's over, you're like, okay, that's enough. I just want to go sit back here. But then there's somebody else knocks on the door. Oh, I want to talk to so-and-so or whatever. And so I guess what I would say is encouraging people to stay humble, because no matter what, you still are a human being. And that's one of the things I learned in Indian country or working with Native people is this concept of equality. And back to this, why is diversity and equity important? Because we are all humans here on the planet together. We do breathe the same air, which didn't work out so well in COVID, right? So that teaches us a lesson, right? If you want to breathe the same air, don't wear a mask. If you want to not maybe breathe all the same air, wear a mask. That time's pretty much gone. So I would encourage people to more or less stay humble, because there's always someone better than you are on every level. And if they're not better now, go find some 7-year-old on YouTube who's already got a 1600 SAT and can play Mozart on the piano and has figured out physics and calculus.
You're not always going to remain on top.
Right, that's right. There's going to be a time where, you ultimately are not on top. Somebody else is, because there's always somebody smarter, stronger, faster. I don't know about better looking than you guys, but, there's always somebody out there. And so don't, get so full of yourself that, because look at all the people we've seen go down in the last few years who were titans in their industries and yet got taken down by their
misconduct,
peccadillos. I don't know what the word is to really use. You know, problems.
Yeah.
You know, because, and you work in the public environment. That's something I've learned. You know, as a male. You know, especially since because my age, I grew up in the women's lib era. So already, just from being a kid and young teenager in the women's lib era, it was like, hey, women are just as important as men, and there was never any issue with that in my world just because of when I grew up. I remember in junior high when Billie Jean King beat the guy with the glasses. I can't
Whatever his name was.
Yeah, see, we don't even remember. Bobby Fischer?
Yeah,
no, that was the chess player.
Well,
Whoever he was. See, that's just it. It's like Billie Jean King is like, she's the one. So I remember coming into Wagner Junior High, right? And there was a big sign. It had the women's sign on it with the circle, you know, in the line. And it said, "Thank you, Billie Jean." And that was 1975 or 6 or something like that. Thank you for like showing that a woman can beat a man in tennis. Now, that does not translate to the contemporary era of all these other sports issues we're talking about with gender. I'm not going to go down that path because this is the encouragement part, not the further discussion part. So what I encourage people to do is keep in mind that we're all here together, and we do have to work together to keep things going. And I think if you have a top-down mentality, like I'm the executive and what I say goes for everybody, period, that's not democracy. And so I don't want to go all the way down that, but we do have to be able to make our own decisions. But I want to encourage people to be multifaceted in the media world and learn to do it all. I want to encourage people to listen to music, support musicians. If you can, learn to play an instrument. Have some fun with it. It'll give you a lot of peace. And then I would say it's important to do personal scholarship on your family.
Do you have anything you want to plug?
Yeah.
Anything?
Plug. My book is called Oklahoma Music Guide. I have a band. It's called Slap Out. And the Oklahoma Music Hall of Fame is important. The new Dancing Turtle Festival, I'm on the board there in Stillwater with this big block we're putting together in Stillwater, Block 49. It's going to be a multi-use performance space, and we have a arts festival we put on last summer, and the next one will be this June. So Dancing Turtle is something to look out for. Anything else? My radio station, KUSH, which is also known as the Cush, serendipitously in contemporary times. Which we did not plan on, but we're in Cushing, Oklahoma, CUSH. And when they awarded the call letters in the 1953, CUSH, we'll just make that KUSH. So that's why we have that. We've had people drive up to the station thinking it's a dispensary. We've had people call.
You choose the green as your color.
Yeah, well, we got the green letters up there.
So that's not entirely, I mean, you know.
Hey, marketing, right? You're trying to like get it out there.
Might as well lean into it.
Yeah, so,
are you on Spotify? Are you guys on Spotify?
Slap Out's on Spotify. We just recorded 4 new songs in David Teagard's studio in Tulsa, and those will be out after the first of the year. And
so by the time this is out, those songs will be on
I would also plug Rogers State University because, you know, without it, I wouldn't know you guys. You wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be sitting here. I've had a really good career here, and I don't know how much longer it's going to last or how much longer it'll last, but
depends on how controversial this is.
Yeah, right. You've received an executive order that you're no longer department head. You can work for the maintenance crew if you want to finish it out. The other thing I'd plug is RSU Radio. Yeah, because it's an excellent radio station, and it is Tulsa's really only progressive, independent, college-type station where you can hear all kinds of music. And the program I've done there, Native Air, since 1998, it's on Sunday mornings at 10. And so between the 2 radio stations and the television station, you know, that keeps me pretty busy. But I would plug those 2 as well, RSU TV as well. So, you know, just trying to, and you guys. Plug y'all. Good job.
Thank you.
How long has this gone? What time is it?
It's gone long. It's gone.
All right, well,
that's good.
Is it our longest?
It's not our longest.
It's not our longest.
What else do you want to hear about? I can tell you some more.
No.
Talk about Nashville.
I enjoy talking with you. I love hearing you talk, and everything, and your perspective is always so great. And
thank you.
We always knew we wanted to have you on here eventually, so I'm glad that worked out time-wise and everything to have you on. And can people follow you in particular anywhere? So
I'm all the usual. You know, it's I think Facebook's just my name, and then on TikTok and
you're on TikTok.
Yeah, DocFo, DOCFO.
Okay.
And same for Instagram. But I never look at TikTok during the day, Governor, because it's illegal.
try
And
to
you
get you
shut
in
it
trouble
down on our campus, so we can't actually watch TikTok unless we use our own data. And what teacher has money for their own data? None. So thanks.
I did not know you were on TikTok.
Yeah,
Like,
DocFo, DOCFO.
Well, great. I'm glad to have you on and everything.
My pleasure.
Yes.
Thanks, guys. Keep on going, as we say. Now it would be considered woke.
Yeah.
Dr. Foley's too woke.